Hello and welcome, friends, to our Secular Buddhist Essentials program. My name is Venerable Tarpa. Today's an exciting class. In last week's class, we finished up the first part of our text, which was Introduction, History, Adaptation of Buddhism. And I thought it went quite well. But today's special because today we're starting part two, and so for the next foreseeable future, we're going to be talking about what the Buddha taught, the Buddha's actual teachings. This is the meat of Buddhism, and this is where I have to work hard to get everything in place. Anyways, I'm really excited to be starting it. It took a lot of work this week to prepare. And I have a caveat and a lot of this I'm just reading from the text because I'm still trying to figure out how we'll assemble this in the final text. But we do have this paragraph at the beginning that talks about uh, how the presentation in part two works, and it says, I think I'll just read it. So, as mentioned earlier, there are many unique interpretations and presentations of the Buddha's teachings asserted by different Buddhist traditions and schools of thought, be it the grounded Theravada, the universal Mahayana, or the mystical Vajrayana. However, there is no standard view of the Buddha's teachings on which everyone agrees. To this day, many important topics are still being actively debated by scholars, even within the same traditions. Those who hold different views. With that said, for the sake of simplicity and clarity for the novice, this text endeavors to posit a concise, standardized view of the Buddhist teachings, of course, from a SBT, secular Buddhist lens. For advanced students, the endnotes of this text will have extensive notes and share a much deeper presentation of the material that's included. And it'll include many of the unique views of the various traditions. So we talked about that when we started the text, that we're writing the text in two levels. So the general text, I want it to be accessible to everyone. So I like to challenge people's intellects by writing it in an intelligent way. But we want it to be fairly straightforward. And then for the advanced students, we're just going to load up the endnotes with all kinds of citations there. So with sharing where these are coming from, what sutras are coming from, different views, that kind of stuff. Okay, with that out of the way, I wasn't sure if I was going to share it or not, but I thought I'd share, just take a moment and talk a little bit about my thought process going into this part two. So in Buddhism, for Buddhist teachers, there's often a bit of confusion, or there's a challenge to organizing the outline of the Buddhist teachings. And there really isn't any set way of doing so. Some teachers like to start with the Four Noble Truths, others start with the Three Marks of Existence. And the problem it's a bit confusing is often because the topics are often dependent on each other. So, in a sense, we have a thing called the Three Marks of Existence, which I haven't taught you yet in this text. But some of the topics, like the first one is impermanence or change. Well, that's a pretty straightforward topic, right? But then the second topic on suffering, that's clearly better shared after the Four Noble Truths, which are designed to share that, or the teachings on non-self, which is very complicated. And so the idea of starting with that, then you end up having to explain everything twice, or give pseudo explanations and later have stronger explanations. Therefore, it's a bit challenging. And coming from a secular point of view, we're also challenged, but we also have freedom that we don't have to try to stick to a traditional idea or outline. So, anyways, I spent a great amount of the week pondering that. And in my text, Tibetan Buddhist Essentials, I liked the outline there, but I decided I didn't want to use that, which is more traditional. So in this case, I worked on a model that I think works well. And it kind of works so it's subject. So we're going to start with, like chapter 1 here is the nature of ourselves. So I decided that I want to start with ourselves to explain the subject itself, who and what we are. And then from there, explain how we interact with our environment and the world around us. And so this is the first time I'm sharing this outline. And in the final text, we do have a choice to do it a different way, but let's give it a try. And I'd be thrilled to hear what all of you think afterwards. There is one caveat that oftentimes understanding the true nature of ourselves tends to be kind of a complex topic in Buddhism, but the task at hand is making it simple. So, anyways, with that said, I'd love to start. Again, I have a text here that I've written for the book itself, and I'm going to kind of use it and augment it a little for our program today. I think the presentation is fairly short, so I would encourage everyone to participate. Maybe we can have a really good discussion on some of these topics. So in part 1 of the text, we explained awakening and defined it as to realize or awaken to the true nature of ourselves and reality. Or you could say, knowing and seeing things as they truly are. That's a really famous quote from the Theravada tradition, one that always really appealed to me. Knowing and seeing things as they truly are. So you could say, in Buddhism, that's the goal itself, right? There's more to it than that. With that knowing and with that seeing, there's also an experiential experience that comes with it, right? It's not just simply that conceptual kind of idea. So anyways, with that premise, I'd like to begin part 2 of this text by diving into the Buddha's account of the true nature of ourselves. The Buddha shared a remarkably empowering vision of the human condition, emphasizing our unique potential for transformation and liberation. He viewed human life as a precious blessing and a rare opportunity, possessing a potential to become sublimely noble of heart and mind. That's a quote from the sutras. Isn't that beautiful? That we could become sublimely noble of heart and mind. He praised our innate capacity for kindness, compassion, and generosity, and our inherently open and tender hearts, while regarding our primal impulses as vulgar, low, ignoble, and beneath us. The reason that last passage really stands out to me is that I saw it on a tablet when I was at Bodh Gaya. So Bodh Gaya, of course, as you know, is the place in India where it's said the Buddha attained enlightenment. And, now that I say that, I think I'm mistaken. I think I saw this at Sarnath, which is where the Buddha gave his first teaching. Nevertheless, there's a garden, and you can walk around, and they have beautiful Buddhist sayings everywhere. And I came across this tablet, and it shared that the Buddha regarded our primal impulses as low, vulgar, ignoble, and beneath us. And it really spoke to me. It really gave me an idea of the stature that the Buddha held us up. He thought we were, really magnificent creatures, and he thought these qualities that sadly a great deal of us really spend our life pursuing. He saw it just beneath us. He saw that we were magnificent beings, or at least have the potential to be magnificent beings. So what I just read, I think, is really important to me. It's often easy to get weighed down in Buddha's presentation of what's wrong with us, right? Talking about our afflictions and our limitations, all the problems with life. Sometimes we lose sight of the beauty that the Buddha shared in his outlook of things. I remember a story when the Buddha was getting close to passing away. As much as he often paints samsara, the world of samsara, as a less than acceptable place, he turns to Ananda and he says that he's really going to miss his worldly existence. He's going to miss the earth. He's going to miss the world. So it's really important to me to get a balanced view of that. So to begin to understand what we are, we first have to look at the way the person or sentient being exists. Most of us tend to think of ourselves as static objects existing in a somewhat fixed manner of being. But this is far from the truth. When examined, we find that beings are living, dynamic processes existing in a state of constant change, with countless aspects of our bodies, minds, our perceptions, and our habits all arising and passing away in each moment. Through this understanding, we begin to realize that we exist more akin to a flowing river, continually moving, shifting, and adapting, while constantly being shaped by countless causes and conditions. So how about an example of that? Let's say I have a friend named Janet. Janet is a mom. She likes to cook. She likes to play tennis. And when we see her, we say, "Hey, there's Janet." We commonly see or presume Janet as existing as a static object. But when we look closer through analysis, we find that she exists in a far more complex way. Physically, she has a body, but through analysis, we understand that it's not a single thing, but a collection of parts, functions, and processes, all in a state of constant change. She has a mind, and when we look closer, we see that her mind is not a single thing, but a collection of networks of interactions and cognitive events. She also has a lifetime of experience. And through analysis, we find that it's actually a vast collection of experiences compiled from each moment of her existence. And we know she has a name and identity. But when examined, we see that it's also a collection of ideas, of stories, and events that encompasses the totality of experience throughout her life. So as you can see, Janet is not a thing, but instead is a living, dynamic process, existing in a state of constant change. Her countless components arising, changing, passing away in each moment, influenced by countless causes and conditions, both external and internal, and from the past, present, and even future. What an extraordinary creature. What a wondrous being. This view brings with it an extraordinary clarity and awe and appreciation for this sentient creature. These flowing rivers that we are, my apologies, and through which an appreciation for the miracle and wonder contained within each of us arises. What do you guys think of that? Kind of poetic at the end. My question to you is, as the author, is that a pretty straightforward presentation? Did everybody find that to be clear? Does it bring up more questions, or do you think that's a pretty straightforward presentation of beings? Yeah, Nembak, please share.
I thought it was pretty straightforward and simple to understand. I don't think it's too long or overcomplicated, in my view.
Oh, thank you. David, please.
Oh, me. Um, yeah, I thought it was quite inspiring, the first bit of it. Um, I think the constant change element I'm not quite clear about, because to say that everything's in constant change doesn't seem that important. The question is whether the change is significant. So my hand is in constant change, all the wee molecules and everything are buzzing about the place. But there's no significant change moment to moment in my hand. So I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure the constant change thing is that significant. Could you
I thought it
comment on that?
weighs against the presumption that things are static objects.
Yes,
So
that's
the
my.
idea that when you realize whatever phenomena you're looking at, especially your sentient beings, that there's this evolution that's always happening. In every minute of the human body, there's cells that are falling away in the body itself. In the mind, there's new ideas, there's all kinds of new connections happening. And so you start to realize how, wow, we're almost, we're so different even within each moment. This idea changed. So it lends to the idea of the flowing river. It's not a static pond. It's in a state of constant change, flowing, shifting, moving, adapting. So to me, it kind
But
of tied in with that.
but isn't the issue of whether those changes are significant? I mean, in a flowing river, to stretch the analogy, a flowing river, the water completely changes moment to moment, whereas there's very little significant change in me moment to moment, or
I think it's
you.
the same in both. I think that the significance for the river would be where it's going, but to understand the nature of the river is to realize that the definition by nature, it's constantly changing. It's moving, it's flowing. So when we're trying to understand our true nature, whether or not any changes are significant or not, the idea is that we're fluid in nature. We're not static. Everything is changing, moving. The body, even when we sit perfectly still inside the body, and it's in a state of constant motion. So yeah, I thought it was important to understand that. I didn't want to dig into impermanence at this level, but I did want to give that idea of
Okay.
and maybe for me it leads more to evolution. That in a sense, even that person you met last week isn't really that same person the following week. They could have watched some political stuff on TV and have completely different views the next time you meet them. I'm not saying they're not the same person. Clearly they are. Their DNA is the same. But just saying that, we change so much. Usually we notice it further, right? When we see an old friend we haven't seen for years and we find out he's adopted some strange political views, and you say, I can't believe he was such a nice guy. So, yeah, change is a big part of it all. Oh, Rinche?
Yeah. I really liked the that you used a concrete example, even if it is an imaginary one with Janet. I think it lands the point very very good. And I don't know if you were trying to do that, but your explanation sounded like almost like you were trying to explain emptiness.
I kind of, so what I was afraid is in our discussions that you guys would want to bring these up to very deep topics and the ideas, and I would say, no, we're going to explain that later. But in a sense, yeah, we were trying to touch on those. So in a sense, we're leading people's minds in that direction. That was my thought. So we're touching on them now, just barely. And then I think by the time we get there, they'll be very natural. And we'll say, you remember we talked about Janet having a name and an identity, but it was just a collection of concepts and ideas. Then we could take that a step further, right? The A lot of the end part was more just built upon the first paragraph of talking about the amazing creatures that the Buddha saw us as. That's why I kind of ended it in kind of a poetic way, talking about the wonder of these beings and their flowing nature. Yeah. And for you that are philosophy buffs, this is where Heidegger and Buddhism kind of come together, or philosophers like Whitehead. But Heidegger had the same idea that everything's in a state of change, and we see things more through, we see the world in more of a verb sense, and we define things by what they do instead of what they are, because of course things aren't static beings; they're not static phenomena. Anyways, I thought it was kind of pretty. Hey, let's move on to the next part. It's even better. You guys are going to love this part. So let's talk a little bit more about our true nature. So our true nature, or you could say, true nature is has a little bit of a poetic license to it, right? It's used especially in Mahayana Buddhism, but what they really mean by that is something closer to intrinsic characteristics of human beings, right? And to go even further, the Theravada don't like to imply that anything is intrinsic in human beings, that there's anything, and of course I would share this in later classes. This is part of the endnotes. And they would say that true nature is properly understood as inherent potentiality that arises reliably in the mind when obstructions are removed. Am I the only one that finds that humorous? You notice how careful they are with the word. So they're saying, well, yeah, we understand you mean true nature, but we can't call it intrinsic. We can't call it. So let's say it's an inherent potentiality that's reliable, right? So they're saying when obscurations, afflictions are removed, that this nature is there, right? Or the possibility for it to arise is there, but it is reliable. Any comments after that line? Isn't that funny? Yeah.
Can you?
I think.
Sorry, one more time. Is it reliable intrinsic characteristics, or?
If you're taking notes, I'm also going to share the text at the end of the
Okay.
class if you don't want to get writer's cramp. I use the word characteristics. Yeah, that's the word I use. But Theravada like to call them inherent potentialities. So the true nature is often understood as pertaining to the three wholesome roots. This is also found in the sutras and shared by the Theravada tradition. And the three wholesome roots are they're shared in negation. They're non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. So that might sound familiar to everyone. We learned in part 1 of the three poisons, the main afflictions that we're plagued by, which is greed, hatred, and delusion. So here, the three wholesome roots are non-greed, non-hatred, and non-delusion. You notice they're called roots, right? So the Buddha shared that underneath our afflictions, these things are there. Buddhism asserts our true nature and or the true nature of the mind, depending on the tradition, as innately bright, clear, luminous, radiant, pure, and free of imperfections. However, for most beings, our true nature is obscured by afflictions and limitations that prevent us from realizing and experiencing that true awakened state. These afflictions and limitations are numerous and include things like greed, aversion, ignorance, self-doubt, insecurity, immaturity, selfishness, lack of self-control, anxiety, laziness, and many, many more. According to Buddhism, our afflictions are not inherent to ourselves or the mind, but instead are acquired through causes and conditions, similar to being afflicted by an illness. However, through dedicated practice, we can transcend our afflictions and purify our minds, purify ourselves and our minds, thereby revealing our true awakened nature. What'd you guys think of that? You think I got some clarity out of that? Not too complicated? Mr. Namdak, please.
Hey, I don't know if it's a question, but could you share more detail about this idea of afflictions being external and being acquired, and that absent of those afflictions would be the true nature?
Sure. We don't imply that the afflictions are external. They can arise either externally or internally. Yeah, they arise from causes and conditions. Afflictions like greed, you can imagine, they can be environmental. It can have a lot to do with how you were brought up. You know, whether you were poor or rich when you were a child, the way your family dealt with money. And some can be much subtler within us. Some of the greed comes from fear, from worrying that you're not going to have enough, so you're forced into this feeling of acquiring all the time. So yeah, our afflictions and human limitations, which we all share the same afflictions, just in different amounts. But the Buddhism asserts that they're not part of our true nature. They come about through our environment. They come about through karma and experience. But Buddhism also says that we can transcend them, since they're not natural parts. So in Buddhism, we're working at transcending them all, and therefore getting back to those wholesome roots, the pure nature of our existence. Yeah, Kempo.
Is it true nature the same as Buddha nature?
No, they're not. So Buddha nature is a bit of a slippery slope. It's a concept that a lot of traditions have very different views. It arises from the Mahayana school, and it comes in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, which is related to, teaches on skillful means, and it also teaches on Buddha nature. Some assert, a lot of the Mahayanas assert that we're born with this Buddha nature. Now, some see that as that we're actually Buddhas, but we're covered over by afflictions, and all we have to do is peel the onion or clean the glass for our Buddhahood to reach out. So they assert that we're all Buddhas and don't know it, and we have to get to that. Where other teachers, especially Tsongkhapa, one of my favorite philosophers, he said, well, according to the scriptures, this would be impossible, because it's asserted that once you become awakened to that level, it's impossible to fall back into samsara or lower states of mind. So the idea is, if there is a piece of Buddha in you, it could never be covered up like that. So people have a lot of different views. Tsongkhapa believes that Buddha nature is the potential of all beings to evolve to the point of being Buddhas. So now in that sense, you could say it could be fairly related to our true nature. But here, it's really just about potentiality. But doesn't this just sound like evolution? Evolution says the same, right? Evolution says that beings have the potential to improve themselves, to evolve into better machines, better beings, right? Animals evolve to be faster runners to get away from danger, or better predators. We can move forward, we can evolve. So for myself, in a secular way, I don't think I'm really going to touch on the topic of Buddha nature in an SPT curriculum. Any thoughts on that? Anybody have different thoughts on Buddha nature and why we should potentially use it? David, you want to share? You're muted, dear friend. David's our SPT philosopher.
And
You wouldn't
you say,
believe the notes I get after every teaching.
I wasn't going to ask about Buddha nature, but seeing as you've said it, I personally don't get it. I think that's the simplest way I could put it. I just don't get Buddha nature, but that's just my statement. To say it's the potential for human beings to become Buddhas doesn't tie in. I don't see the connect. True nature, I get, right. Okay, I can get that. But how it relates to Buddha nature,
No,
I
yeah,
don't.
I don't see it either.
But the question I was going to ask was, if I can remember what it is, yeah, about our characteristics developing through experiences and causes and conditions. What about genetically inherited characteristics? How do they
Very
fit
much
into
so.
them? Yeah.
Yeah, we're born with a great deal of afflictions. The most important is we're born with ignorance. You know,
Ah, yeah.
babies are born not knowing anything. Babies are born
Yeah.
ignorant. And so ignorance is the most foundational and important of all the afflictions. It's the one that we're trying to transcend. Once you transcend ignorance, that's awakening itself.
Mm.
So that's the most profound. But you're right, genetics plays into it as well. That's like genetic sickness, but then also personality, right?
Mhm.
Um, and predispositions. So absolutely, that would be considered a cause or condition.
Hmm.
Genetics are causes and conditions as well. And then
Okay,
all the
thanks.
people you knew who made an impact on you and your mind, right? You had a friend that was a racist, and somehow, some of that trickles into your own mind. I mean, we're sponges, right? So these afflictions and limitations just all around us. And again, some of them just naturally occurring in humans. Anger. It seems to be anger is apparent in all animals, right? I mean, you can see animals become angry and things. Yeah, Kempo, please.
Uh, these afflictions in the past, they may have saved our life. They'll be good, like angry or may have saved us a million of years ago.
An evolutionary biologist would probably say that's exactly where they came from. Evolutionary biologists believe that all of our experiences at some point were beneficial. That's how they got pulled into our evolutionary trajectory, right? Trajectory. So agreed. Like fight or flight response, very important, especially when we were less evolved. Now it's becoming problematic, right? Now it's creating stress in us. So no doubt about it. Afflictions and limitations are a very complex subject. I mean, on the surface level, you kind of get it. These are qualities that we're trying that are problematic. Sometimes beneficial. Fear can be affliction, but fear can also be wisdom, right? You can act wisely out of, let's call it, concern. That's an element of wisdom. But then at the same time, depending on how you're experiencing it, it can also be very neurotic. It can be a neurotic affliction, especially if it's not founded, right? Yeah. David, please. Hi, Shiva. Welcome. You're muted, David.
Seriously saying that fear can be useful or a blessing or whatever. a good thing?
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, you can, fear can be legitimate. We can really have concerns about things, environmental, you know. I mean, when you think about fear, you have to think about how broad it is. We're not just talking about running away from a lion. We're talking about real concerns for ourselves, for the future, for our children. And so maybe those we wouldn't call fears, maybe we call those concerns.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
nevertheless, there is an aspect of that. There is an aspect of wisdom that notices danger and responds to it. So, but then
yeah.
you're
No,
right. On the other side, we can have like just neurotic, strange fears of things like that doesn't benefit us. That actually probably harms us, like phobias and things like that. So fear can be quite a broad term, especially in Buddhism. One that we're trying to transcend, but then at the same time, there is an aspect of concern that we want to keep, right? There is a little bit of it that we want it to be there to point out to us when something is dangerous and to bring it to our attention, to alarm us about it. Hey, pretty cool. And we talk about afflictions. Then we talked about limitations. We talked about this a lot in skillful living. That I often use the word limitations as synonymous with afflictions, but limitations we talk about shared human limitations, and that idea that we all really do share the same afflictions. Uh, we might not be plagued by them, like some of us might be caring, generous people, but there is the idea of selfishness in us, and sometimes it's per topic, right? We might be selfish about some things. Maybe it's our ice cream. Nobody touched my ice cream. And then the rest of my life, I'm really kind and generous. But don't you get near my ice cream. But we all share them. We all. I hardly ever feel like real anger. I can't remember the last time I have. But I have irritation. I can be irritated by software, especially when I'm working. So we do share them all, but we have them all, we share them all in different quantities. So when you meet someone who's really afflicted by anger, when we realize that, well, I share it too, but they, for whatever the reason, they didn't choose it. That they just have to deal with it. But for whatever the reason, they're really plagued by that. It gives us compassion for others. We just had a loving kindness meditation. We talked about that. When we see that these afflictions aren't a true aspect of people, they're like illnesses. They're things that people are trying to work with, to transcend. So when you see that in Buddhism, we try to we blame the affliction and not the person. Somebody does something stupid or bad or mean, we try to say, it's the ignorance, the affliction of ignorance, not the person themselves. So again, we get back to this idea of true nature, and I like the idea of intrinsic characteristics. So I've been asked about this a bit because people will say, "Oh, come on, there's horrible people in the world that don't care about how their actions affect anyone else, and how could they possibly have a true nature, like something like that?" Again, we just see it as a deep sickness, kind of like somebody's really sick in the hospital, but we know underneath it all, there's a healthy person. Their innate way of being isn't a sick person. Even people born with debilitating illness that they might have with their whole life, it's not who they are. It's not intrinsic in the human condition. It's an affliction that sadly, for whatever the reasons, they had. And one of the ways that we can understand, and you yourself within your own practice can see the truth in this idea of a true nature, is within our practice. And so many of us here, as you know, we've been practicing Buddhism, meditating, working on ourselves, developing our minds, developing our hearts. And we see for ourselves that we're moving in a direction towards that. We're becoming kinder, more patient, calmer, more thoughtful, wiser beings. Whatever wonderful qualities you want to say, we're moving in that direction. And when you practice, like say you're in meditation, say you sit down on the cushion and you're pretty angry, something happened at work, and you're thinking bad thoughts, you want to get even with this person. And when we get into meditation, we settle ourselves down and calm ourselves down, we find that naturally those feelings fall away at a certain point. And you start to notice that no matter what qualities they are, when you get deep into practice, when you get deep into your meditation, there are no malevolent qualities there. You never get deep into meditation and find anger or hatred. When you get deep into meditation, you generally see the same thing every time: calmness, patience, contentment, love, compassion, care for others, appreciation for the world, joy for being alive, right? And the more you practice, the more clear and direct this becomes. And it comes at a point where you reach euphoric states within meditation. And what do you see? You see your true nature, the qualities that we were just talking about. They're all there in that state. And it's reliable. Every time I meditate, those qualities are there, and the opposite qualities are not. Never. I never have malevolent qualities in meditation. In the beginning, some meditators can experience fear, things like that. An angry thought can come up in meditation. It's really not part of the meditation. It's just something that comes up. But as you progress, that disappears. And your meditations, the nature, the characteristics within meditation become reliable. Every time you meditate, always the same, always these beautiful, benevolent qualities. So in Buddhism, they're asserting that this is our true nature. And of course, how it happens is, well, we're meditating, we're calming down, we're getting rid of all that stress, all that anxiety, all that speed and busyness that winds us up and makes us so reactive in the world. Once you can settle down a human being like that, you start to taste your true nature. That's the true nature of humans. So you can see it for yourself. I know that's not conclusive evidence. I'm just sharing a pretty good case for these to be true, right? I don't have that much more to share today. I wanted to just share a simple, straightforward presentation to give a taste to everyone of where we're going in this chapter. And now we're slowly going to be moving through the same topic, the nature of ourselves. So this is a nice introduction, I think. Any thoughts on anything I could have added to it? We had a lot of questions on afflictions. Should I define afflictions a bit more in this text to add some clarity? Please, one at a time. Please, one at a time. David, please.
Just one thing you said there about meditation reveals our true nature. I thought that was very, very useful for me. I'm always wondering about true nature, but I know what meditation reveals.
You've tasted it.
Within myself, yeah, eventually. So I think that's brilliantly clear, and the clearest description of true nature that I've certainly.
And of course, for higher practitioners, it's not just in meditation. That's where you first find it. For regular practitioners, it's available all the time. I experience it all the time. It never really stops. unless I'm driving or get, something makes me really mad, then I forget about it for a little while. But yeah, it becomes part of our default mindset, or even probably better than that. It
Yeah,
is again, we're just uncovering our true nature. So
yeah, yeah.
that's always there. We just have to tap
Superb.
into it. And so that's the progression of Buddhism. That's what we're moving towards. We're moving towards revealing and cultivating this beautiful nature that exists within all human beings, but is covered up by afflictions and limitations. Hey, pretty cool. So next week we're going to be talking about the five aggregates. We've done a teaching on it before, but I have a really nice presentation. The five aggregates, we're going to start getting deeper into the components of the human being. And the five aggregates are the Buddha's model and presentation of what makes up the human being and our conscious experience. It's a fascinating subject, very important subject in Buddhism. So can't wait to share that with you next week. I will make the text for this class available shortly, and want to thank everybody for coming. A couple things going on this week. Tomorrow is our last mind training class with Tenzin Samten at 1600 UTC. Also, we've got the big push for our fundraiser for our Asheville Center project. It's going really nicely. We've gotten a lot of donations and resources coming in. Wanted to thank everybody so much for making it happen. SBT is moving. April 30th was just a handful of days away, about 3 weeks away. And we're going to be moving to Asheville to start our first physical center. And all of you are going to come and visit me and train. It's going to be absolutely fabulous. But if you'd like to help, please post our Asheville fundraiser on your own social media. Tell your friends, tell everybody what an important thing it is, that all we're trying to do is benefit the world and teach happiness to everybody. Okay, with that said, why don't we end today with our altruistic affirmation? May all be healthy, may all be prosperous, may all be well, may all be present, free of past regret and future worry. May all abide in constant appreciation, which is a source of great joy and contentment. May all realize their true nature and the true nature of reality, which is awakening.